My boss at the time, who was the director, decided he wanted to create a deputy director role, and everybody thought that I would get that role.
Today we're discussing strengths and weaknesses.
I went into that interview and I completely messed it up. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to get the job.
How you can turn failure into an opportunity to become successful.
I was heartbroken, crestfallen, and it took the wind from my sails
And finding the courage to bounce back up when you hit the rock bottom.
because almost I wanted it too much. And it was almost like I was willing to sell my soul to the devil.
The theme for this season is Embracing Life's Tapestry. And my guest is Mel Louisu. Would you like to expand on the many lows you might have suffered during your time as Director of Services at Royal Holloway, University of London? And what did you learn from those lows yourself?
Oh, I think the journey to get to that post was actually part of it because I was actually at Royal Holloway for 15 years, I think, overall. And over that time, I had a number of different roles, and I ended up as director of campus services. I spent a lot of time in assistant director roles. And I think one of the most interesting things is that up until that point in my career, I hadn't found a job that I absolutely loved or an organization that I really wanted to stay with. And yet, when I walked into Royal Holloway, it was just like, oh, this feels like home. And I went from sales and marketing manager, so managing just a team. Well, I think it was very depleted when I walked through the doors. I think there was two in the team. We grew that, so in the end, I had about a team of 9. But I was really fortunate. I had lots of professional development. I had lots of opportunities, and I ended up as director of campus services. So 600 people, 21 different business functions. But I think one of the biggest lows for me was when I was in an assistant director role. And this we sort of merged with another department, and we were at the time we were called facilities management. So we had all the sort of soft services and catering and sport and security and all of those things that make an operation, a university tick, but isn't the academic side. And my boss at the time, who was the director, decided he wanted to create a deputy director role. And I really wanted that role. I wanted that role so much. And everybody thought that I would get that role. But as so often is the case in public sector, you don't just move into a role, they have to advertise it. And I wanted it so badly that I engaged somebody that I had worked with to help me through that process because I had to make a presentation. So I sailed through the first interview, lovely. Second interview was a presentation. And what I realize now as I reflect back on it, and as you know, not during the process, but quite shortly afterwards, is that I wanted it so much that actually that presentation wasn't me. It was the person who was coaching me. And I went into that interview and I completely messed it up. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to get the job. I was heartbroken, crestfallen, and they did offer it to somebody else. It was an external candidate, and he declined the job. He came back a third time and then declined the job. And so there was no one in that role. And the person that coached me came to see me afterwards. This was a few days later. And she said, look, there's no one in the role, Mel. Why don't you go and ask them if they'd give it to you on an interim basis? That was a huge turning point for me because it was like, well, it's done and dusted in the water. So I really, at that moment, I was crestfallen, I was hurt, my pride was hurt, everything. And then I was like, am I really going to do this? So again, I took a couple of days to think about it. I put my big girl pants on because they needed to be huge at this point. And I went to see the director of HR, and we had a really honest conversation. And he said to me, "What happened to you, Mel? It was like it wasn't you." And I went, "I know. I just totally messed it up. Totally my fault." And I said, "But I have a proposal for you." And I said, you haven't got anyone else. You're not going to offer it to anyone else. Let me do it for 6 months, put in place any targets that you want me to hit. And if at the end of 6 months I haven't nailed it, I go back to what I was doing. But if I have, then hopefully the job is mine. And unbelievably, they agreed to do that. And what they also agreed to do was put in a support program for me to help guarantee my success, really. And so in the end, it was the best thing that could have ever happened, because not only did I get the job and I got some really clear targets, but I also got a support program, which massively helped me, not just in that role, but when I eventually became director. And so what was one of the worst moments turned into actually one of the best moments. And there's lots of other ones, but that is the one where I think I had to really dive deep. And it was the one where I thought I had it nailed on. You know, I had such a good relationship with my director. I'd been there a lot of years. I had a really good standing in the university. And it took the wind from my sails, and rightly so, because almost I wanted it too much. And it was almost like I was willing to sell my soul to the devil. So here was this person coaching me, not her fault. And I just took everything that she said, instead of turning it inwards and saying, right, is this what I want to do? Does this feel right? I was like, yeah, this is the way I'm going to get it. This is the way I'm going to get it. And I lost who I was in that process. So yeah, really, really valuable, and, you know, so beneficial, because if anyone had told me that was the journey I was going to go on, I'd be like, no. But it was, and it taught me so much about myself, and that need to not always look externally, but turn it, you know, my focus inwards.
So I think in doing so, you showed a lot of initiative, and you also showed the fact that you accepted humble pie, you reflected on it, and you move forward with your life. And that takes a lot of initiative and courage. So I think in that, that's a great story for a lot of people. Because I do remember one time I applied for promotion myself. I didn't get it, and I took it very badly. And I didn't do anything about it except wallow in nostalgia, which is the worst thing you can do in hindsight. So you've shared a great story there. So moving along, you eventually got to become Director of Campus Services at Royal Holloway, University of London. What was the decision, or what were the factors behind you deciding to leave that role and then go into the world of self-employment?
Oh, so I mean, I had the best time at Royal Holloway. I mean, I just loved the people. I loved everything about it. I got married there. I had my two children whilst I was there, and they used to come onto campus, and things that probably wouldn't be allowed to happen now, but they used to. And it was just wonderful. But I mean, one of the other biggest challenges that I had was when we were part of the 2012 Olympics. So we were the village for the rowers and the flat water canoeists. So that's a whole another learning there. So we did all of that. When I stepped up into the role of director, I had a very clear vision about what I wanted to do, what needed to happen. And so after all of that, the restructure, the reorganization, the Olympics, it was almost like, where do I go now? And I had a choice, and it's interesting. It was another crossroads. I think there are some key crossroad moments in my life, and that was one of them. And I I had a choice. I could stay where I was, earning a very nice salary, working with really nice people in a really nice environment. There was really nowhere else for me to go at that point, or I could go and do something different and step outside my comfort zone. And in the end, that was what I decided to do. And but again, it's really interesting because having had so much success at Royal Holloway, I was like, oh, can I go do this elsewhere? And so there's an interim step between me leaving Royal Holloway and starting my own business, which was that for 1 year, I went and worked for a private tech company. So way different from Royal Holloway. And from a work perspective, it was probably the worst year of my life. I mean, I got there and it was there was just no alignment between my values and the values of the MD at the time, who was holding the values of the organization, really. So for a year I battled on, and then at the end of that year there was a mutual parting of ways. But what it did teach me, interestingly, was that actually I'm pretty good at what I do, because this was a completely new sector, a completely different environment, and yet I managed to effect some change, not total, but I did effect some change. So that gave me confidence. And at the end of that year, I had again another decision: do I go and find another job, or do I start working for myself? And working for myself was something that I'd always wanted to do since I left university, but I never did. I got on the sort of pay scale and then that was it. I was off. So I decided that, do you know what? I've got an opportune time here. I can give it a go, and then at least I can never say I didn't do it. And I did. I started working for myself. That first year, oh my goodness, you talk about lessons. There were just so many lessons that year. It was another turning point, because I walked away and thought, I've been in the university sector for years. Those clients will come. They didn't come. And I thought, maybe I don't want to work with universities. Maybe I want to work with small and medium-sized businesses. So I spent a year networking. That didn't get me anywhere because I realized I wasn't a good fit. So at the end of that year, again, it was like, right, okay, Mel, you want to work with universities. You don't just sit on your backside and think they're going to come to me. I have to go out there and get that business. But alongside that, and that was in 2015, alongside that year, my marriage broke down. So it was just, I mean, personally, professionally, everything. Again, at the time, it was really hard to go through because there was no money. But what it did allow me to do is spend time with my daughters. And so to help them move through that very difficult process of their parents separating. So 2015 was a really tough year. And I think, again, testament, I would say I'm quite a determined individual, because every time I got a no, I was like, I'd have my moment and my head in my hands, what am I going to do? But I'd allow that to go on. The next day I'd get up and go, okay, what have I learned from that? What can I do differently? How do I make this work? And again, it was sort of at the start of, I think it was 2016, where I was really like, I really can't continue to do this. I'm going to have to go and get a job. And at the time I was living in Woking, and they gave me, because I'd set up as a new business, they gave me a business coach. And I was doing some trustee work for a charity, and they were looking for a consultant. And I was telling him about it, and he said, well, why don't you ask them if you can have the work? And I was like, oh, conflict of interest, and is this right? And I can't go asking for work. But again, it was that choice point. So I pulled my big girl pants on again, and I went and I asked if I could have the work, and they gave it to me. And that set me on that treadmill. And then the business just grew, and my children were starting to settle into sort of the new family dynamic. So everything worked well. But again, it was it's a tapestry of life that you talk about. That 2015 was a really, really dark year, and I really had to dive deep in order to get through it and not just give up, because the easy thing would have been to give up and go and get another job. That wouldn't have given me my time with my family, and it then wouldn't have allowed me to have the wonderful time I've had running my own business for the last 9 years.
I saw a post there on Instagram yesterday. It was by Lois Creamer. You might know of Lois. And what you were saying on the post was the more niched your business is, the more people will love you for it, and the more followers you will have. Did you find that one of the biggest learnings for you was to really to define the niche offering that you could offer to your prospects within your business? Was that a steep learning curve for you?
It was a long learning curve, is what I would say with that, because I think once I'd got over that first year of recognizing that small and medium-sized businesses we just weren't a good fit. I always recognize from then on, I recognized that universities were my niche. So my market was niche, but what I was offering was quite broad, because up until that point, I'd had this fantastic career that I'd got involved in so many different things. And the leadership piece was the piece I was most passionate about, but people knew me for a variety of different things. So it was almost like, if you pay me money, I'll do it. And I think when you start a business, that I would still maintain that's what you have to do, because unless you can nail it down right from the beginning, there's a reality to it that we have to bring in money. And that was something I battled with for a long time. And actually, again, COVID was a turning point for me, because one, my business fell off a cliff, but two, it was like, right, if I'm going to go back and do this after COVID, what are the bits that I absolutely love? And so yeah, where are we talking? We're talking 2021, and I started my business in 2015. So actually nailing down what was my product and service offering from a niche perspective took 6 years. The market that I was going out to, that was nailed on quite early on. So I think it's something that is easy to say, especially for those of us that are small and medium-sized businesses. It's easy to say that, but it's so hard to get there in reality. At least that's my experience. I mean, if people can do it and they're able to do it and they stick to it, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people.
Yeah. Did you find that once you had defined your niche and you had that product your niche wanted, that your business started to grow exponentially from 2021 forward?
I think that it has grown. And I think that I am a lot clearer. So people are able to they know what I'm about. But has it grown exponentially? No, not yet. But I think the key thing is I am a lot happier, and I am doing what I know I do best. And therefore, I think in the long run, that will get me to where I want to go.
Well done to you in that regard. It's been a steep learning curve for you to take 6 years to really define who your niche offering is and then to provide those products for those people. So, what were the highs and lows in terms of developing your online course, diving deep, climbing higher?
So that was a really interesting journey, because prior to COVID, I had done nothing online. All of my delivery had been face to face. And I don't know whether I was the only person. I don't think I was. I hope I wasn't anyway. But when COVID hit and I was like, oh, this will only be a few weeks. That's fine. I've got money in the bank and I have enough to see me through. It'll be fine. But then it was probably a couple of months later, and I sort of had this aha moment, and I was like, no, this is going to be worse than I thought it was, and I need to do something differently. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to do an online program. And I chose a company that I wanted to partner with. That in itself was a huge learning curve. And we pulled the program together. I started to do a test program with just a small number of delegates. And actually it just didn't work. It didn't work for me. It wasn't working for them. The relationship with the company that I was working with wasn't working. So again, it was another, I love this phrase, it was another big girl pant moment, because I was like, right, I'm right in the middle of a program. What do I do here? So I took some time out, spoke to some people that I really value their opinions, and came up with a plan. So I called time on the program that I will, or the company I was working with. I spoke to all my delegates and promised them that they would still get a program, but it would be different, but hopefully better. And I worked through that, and actually I delivered that program. And in the end, we did a bit of a hybrid, because by then we were coming out of COVID, so we could meet. And what I realized at the end of that, and what I realized when it was all over, was actually for me and the type of work that I do, which is all about diving deep into who we are, I don't want to do that online. I don't think you can do it online. There are certain parts of my business that I do run online now. So I do online coaching online. I'm quite happy to do that, and I think you can do that. But I always try and meet people before we begin an online program. But my leadership program is now done face to face. And it's about turning that focus inwards, because in that relationship with that company, who were all about online delivery, I got lost in their messaging and what they thought was right. And my gut was telling me, no, it's not right. It's not right. But I went with it, a bit like I did when I was deputy director, until that point where I went, I can't do this anymore. And I said no. So I think that was, again, and now the people that come on my program love it. I'm so proud of it. It is an absolute joy to deliver. I learned so much from the people that come on it, and I hope they learn a lot from me and from each other, and from turning their focus inwards, because a big part of it is that. But again, that was another low that became a massive high.
Well done. I know what you're saying there, Mel. That, online courses, they're not without their pitfalls, and they can take a huge amount of time and resources and energy to get them right. But I also found with online courses, once they're out there, you have to keep updating them to keep them relevant. Whereas if you're delivering, as you are now, where you're delivering your leadership courses face to face, it's much easier to incorporate change between coaching programs. And the only person who knows about the updates is yourself effectively. The audience won't know what course you've delivered to other clients in the past, if they're from different organizations, for example. So that's a very interesting perspective to have on online programs and coaching in general. So what you're doing now is you're doing your coaching online, but your leadership programs are delivered face to face. That's a very good idea, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you've also started a podcast, which I've been a guest on, which is an excellent podcast. Would you like to share some of your learnings from that podcast with the audience?
Oh, well, I think that my podcast would not exist. I'd like to give a big shout out to somebody you know as well, but Amy Rowlinson,
Yeah.
because she is somebody that is part of an organization that we're part of. And and I met her and she was on the bandwagon of podcast. And I was always like, no, I'm never running a podcast. I'm happy to be a guest on it, but I'm never running one. And then bizarrely, when was it? It must have been 2021. I woke up one day and I thought, right, I need to run a podcast. And it's one of those things that you think it's easy to do. And you will know this, but the work that goes into it is huge. And one of my blind spots, if you like, is process and sort of setting things up and following through. So Amy ran a coaching program and I signed up for it because I knew that without that structure, it would have failed. And I have to say it was the best thing that I ever did. And if anyone is listening to this that would like to run a podcast, I highly recommend Amy because she knows so much and she's so generous with how she set up and ran her own podcast and the information and the help that she gives you. And we've been running it now for, well, it's coming up for its 2-year birthday, and we still follow all the processes that I set up with Amy. And I think that it's often when you set out on a new journey, one of the learnings is that you've just got to go with the flow. And I think I had no idea how long things would take and how when you're learning a new skill, for example, editing a podcast. I now have somebody in the business that works with me and she does all of that. But it's somebody that I've worked with previously and she had no knowledge of it at the start either. And she's been amazing. So we were learning together. But it was that, I think that was interesting. So I think, and it told me a great deal about sort of project planning because somebody I had on my podcast said, don't get attached to the outcome and be flexible. And that's what I think, when I was first starting up my podcast, it was about, okay, if I can't get an episode out, I can't get an episode out. Just go with it. But I also think one of the other interesting things is, and I don't know whether you've experienced this, but just in the early days, it was easy to get guests on. But now more and more people are back sort of in offices, etc. It is much harder and I have to plan a much further out in order to be able to get guests on and plan seasons and so that's been a big learning as well. But it's also been a joy, and this isn't really a pitfall, but it's been about not getting not being precious. So sitting down at the end of a season and saying, right, what worked, what didn't, how can we improve it? And so there's been various iterations in terms of season length, what we do with the information that we get and the episodes, and how can we repurpose some of that content just to make it so to sort of put it into so many different formats that it's promoting my guests, but it's also providing wonderful free content for my clients and any of the listeners. So I think I'm really proud of it because understanding what goes into behind it, and I have full respect for you and what you do, you realize what an achievement it is. So I'm on episode, well, we're just going out with season 7, and I think we're up to about 65 episodes. And if you get over 50, then you're considered to be in the top 1% of podcasts across the globe. So, I'm very proud of that, but it has been a lesson in continual development and determination and wanting to grow, wanting to improve, and saying, how can we do things better?
On a more positive note, Mel, what inspires you to be successful in life?
Oh, what a good question. What inspires me? I think, and I spoke about this very much when the last time we were together, but I think my daughters have always been my biggest inspiration, and I want to be a good role model for them. I want them to, they probably don't appreciate it now. They're nearly 21 and 18. So, you know, at the moment, mum's just a bit of a weirdo who's been a bit of a pain in the backside, always nagging us. But I think, you know, maybe as they get older, or even when, you know, I'm no longer around, they can look back and go, oh yeah, I got that value from mum. She, you know, she cared about people. She, you know, she did the right thing. And actually, so I think they inspire me. And I think just my inspiration now is to have made a difference, you know, that my life here on earth will have made a difference. And I don't mean, you know, globally or anything like that, but that I will have touched a few people and made a difference, and that, you know, that people will say, oh yeah, she was a good person. So that, I think that's what inspires me most, really.
In other words, you want to leave a legacy for the people that will follow you on. Very good. You have, defined your niche. You have a leadership program that you deliver face to face. You've got online coaching clients and programs. What's next for Mel Louisa?
Oh, wow. So next for me, so this next year, I want to go back and do some more learning. So I think that, you know, so often, and this is what I say to my daughters is, you know, there's such a thing as lifelong learning. And I don't ever want to stop learning, because then that means I don't grow. And if I don't grow, how can I be there for the people around me, my clients, my daughters, my friends, my family? So I haven't done a lot of learning. The last time I sort of officially did any learning was back in 2018. And then obviously COVID hit, and I had my children and the business. And but my youngest daughter is going off to university in September. My eldest daughter is happy living her life. So I feel like I've got some time now to do some of what I want to do. So this next year is about going out and learning some new skills, and things that will make it into my business in a way that may be quite surprising to people.
Good luck to you. And as Dave Horner says, set a massive goal and go rhino. And I do believe in lifelong learning myself, to be quite honest. I would regard myself as being a lifelong student. However, in the past, when it came to continuous professional development, I made the mistake of taking the easy option. And what I'd say to the audience is, when it comes to CPD, reflect on your most recent performance review and pick one area that you need to work on hard. Take a step out of your comfort zone and learn and develop new skills for yourself that will get you a better job in another organization or secure promotion for you. So I think it's a case of really getting out of your comfort zone and embracing that big challenge. One final question for you, Mel, today. If the opportunity came your way that you could have one wish granted in life without question, what would that be? Or one request?
If I could have one request, and I suppose this goes back to the legacy and making a difference, for me, it would be that everybody on planet Earth became kinder to each other. And that sounds very altruistic, and I don't mean it like that, but over the past year, I've become a Samaritan's Listening volunteer, and it is the greatest privilege to be a volunteer for that organization. But there are so many people out there having a hard time, so many people struggling. And I think that sometimes we can get caught up in our own lives. You know, I've got to have this thing, I've got to do that, I need to get the next promotion. And actually, if we all just slowed down a bit and were just kinder to each other and gave up some time to people that don't have everything that we have, and that we were all nicer to each other. It sounds, but in simple ways, just stopping and listening to somebody who's lonely walking down the street, whatever it might be, then the world would be a better place. And for me, you know, if I was to be granted that wish and that were to happen, then it would absolutely fill my need that I want to make a difference in the world. And if I can leave the world in a kinder place where people are nicer to each other and there is a better community feel, then that would be it.